music of the classical period. Objectives. 1. Relate classical music to its historical and cultural background. 2. Identify the famous composers from classical period. 3. Understand the vocal and instrumental music from classical period. In the history of Western music, the term classical refers to the period from 1750–1820. During this time, there were significant changes in musical forms and style, distinguishing the music from those of the previous era. Hi, let us answer the pre-test. 1. A musical work with different movements for an instrumental soloist and orchestra. A. Symphony. B. Sonata. C. Concerto. D. Rondo. 2. What is the general texture of classical music? A. Monophonic. B. Homophonic. C. Heterophonic. D. Polyphonic. 3. A musical composition designed to be played by the full orchestra. A. Symphony. B. Sonata. C. Concerto. D. Cantata. 4. It is called the Age of Reason. A. Medieval. B. Renaissance. C. Baroque. D. Classical. 5. A multi-movement work for solo instrument. A. Symphony. B. Sonata. C. Cantata. D. Concerto. 6. The classical era, also called Age of Reason, is the period from 1750 to 1820. The cultural life was dominated by the aristocracy, as patrons of musicians and artists generally influenced the arts. Significant changes in musical forms and styles were made. In the middle of the 18th century, Europe began to move toward a new style in architecture, literature, and the arts, known as classicism. It was also pushed forward by changes in the economic order and social structure. Instrumental music was patronized primarily by the nobility. The term classical denotes conformity with the principles and characteristics of ancient Greek and Roman literature and art, which were formal, elegant, simple, freed, and dignified. The same characteristics may also describe the melodies of classical music. Harmony and texture is homophonic in general. The dynamics of loud and soft was clearly shown through the extensive use of crescendo and diminuendo. A style of broken chord accompaniment called Alberti bass was practiced. The great composer of the period were Franz Joseph Haydn, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, and Ludwig van Beethoven. Sonata, concerto and symphony are the instrumental forms developed during this era, while opera seria and opera buffa are the two vocal forms. Sonata, a multi-movement work for solo instrument. Sonata came from the word solere, which means to make a sound. This term is applied to a variety of works for a solo instrument such as keyboard or violin. The nickname Moonlight Sonata traces to the 1830s, when German Romantic poet Ludwig Rellstab published a review in which he likened the first movement of the piece to a boat floating in the moonlight on Switzerland's Lake Lucerne.
There is a reason why it's so famous, and that's because it sounds like a profound meditation of the soul. It captures listeners' imaginations like few other pieces of music. The legend is that Beethoven was first inspired to write his Moonlight Sonata whilst visiting a lake in Hungary. Sonata allegro form, the most important form that developed during the classical era, consists of three distinct sections: exposition, development, and the capitulation.
Exposition. The first part of a composition in sonata form that introduces the theme. Development is the middle part of the sonata allegro form wherein themes are being developed. Recapitulation repeats the theme as they first emerged in the opening exposition. Concerto is a multi-movement work designed for an instrumental soloist and orchestra. It is a classical form of music intended primarily to emphasize the individuality of the solo instrument and text hymn at the virtuosity and interpretive abilities of the performer. The solo instruments in classical consent to include violin, cello, clarinet, bassoon, trumpet, horn, and piano. A concerto has three movements: fast, slow, and fast.
Let us answer the quiz.
Identify the term being described. 1. The general texture of classical music. A. Monophonic. B. Homophonic. C. Heterophonic. D. Polyphonic. 2. Musical composition designed to be played by the full orchestra. A. Symphony. B. Sonata. C. Concerto. D. Cantata. 3. Who composed the Moonlight Sonata? A. Mozart. B. Haydn. C. Beethoven. D. Stravinsky. 4. It is a multi-movement work for solo instrument. A. Symphony. B. Sonata. C. Concerto. D. Cantata. 5. A section of a sonata allegro form where the themes are introduced. A. Exposition. B. Development. C. Concerto. D. Rondo.